It started with a seat. The seminar hall at the University of Istanbul was buzzing that morning, students from all over the world gathering for the South Asian literature module. Ayan had arrived early, coffee in one hand, notebook in the other. He picked a seat near the window, the light streaming in like gold dust, illuminating pages of forgotten poets. That's when she walked in. Zara, wrapped in a deep maroon shawl, her dark curls brushing her shoulders, and eyes scanning the room with quiet curiosity. She wasn't loud, but she had presence, the kind that filled the room without trying. She sat next to him, not by fate, not by any dramatic twist, but simply because it was the only empty seat. Ayan glanced sideways, noticing the book she held. The 40 Rules of Love. He smiled. You know, I always thought Shams was the more compelling character, he said, half teasing. She looked at him, eyebrows raised, amused. And I thought you'd be the kind to defend Rumi. That was how it began. A simple exchange, a shared love for stories. And from that moment on, the conversation never truly ended. They started attending lectures together, arguing over metaphors and translations. During breaks, they'd walk to the old chai stall just outside the university gates, a little wooden cart tucked under a vine-covered arch. It served the kind of tea that warmed your bones and quieted your heart. Their differences were obvious. Ayan, from the bustling streets of Lahore, loved jazz and late-night strolls. Zara, raised in Karachi's coastal hum, had a soft spot for ghazals and the way the sea always knew when you were sad. But their hearts aligned. They spent evenings in the garden courtyard of the university hostel, string lights overhead, the air filled with the scent of blooming jasmine and the soft murmur of other students sharing dreams and heartbreaks. Sometimes they read poetry to each other. Sometimes they said nothing at all. It didn't feel like falling in love, it felt like recognizing someone you had always known, in a place you'd never been before. I think we were meant to meet. Here, Zara whispered once, her fingers brushing his as they sat under the stars. Ayan looked at her, his voice steady. Maybe we met in another lifetime. And this is just us finding each other again. They laughed often over burnt toast from the cafeteria, over Ayan's terrible Turkish, over Zara's obsession with collecting postcards from every bookstore. They visited. They made promises. They never spoke out loud, like staying in touch forever, no matter where life took them. But time, as it often does, had its own plans. As the semester neared its end, the reality of their separate lives loomed closer. Flights booked, degrees completed, the future knocking with uncertainty in its voice. Still, in those early days in Istanbul, with fairy lights above and dreams between them, they didn't speak of endings. They only held on to beginnings, the beginning of us. They always knew time was not their ally. From the moment they met under the Istanbul sun, the clock had been ticking quietly, relentlessly. Still, neither Ayan nor Zara allowed it to haunt their days. They walked the cobbled streets like they were infinite, shared tea like it could freeze time, and lingered in bookstores like they had forever to read every title together. But forever had a deadline. It came one morning, crisp and bright, when Zara received the email. The scholarship she'd dreamed of, the one she'd applied for in a quiet moment of hope months ago, had arrived. Paris, full tuition, a once-in-a-lifetime chance. Ayan had been sitting beside her on the university bench when she read the words. He noticed her hands tremble slightly, the smile trying to hide the fear behind it. I got it, she whispered. He blinked. Paris? She nodded, eyes shining but unsure. In 3 weeks. There was silence. Not the kind that hurts, but the kind that holds everything words cannot carry. He didn't congratulate her right away. Not because he wasn't proud, he was, deeply, but because he knew what it meant. The late night walks, the whispered verses, the chai cups and laughter, all of it would now be stretched across thousands of miles. I'm happy for you, he finally said softly. Really? Zara reached for his hand. I didn't expect this to happen. Us? Neither did I. They didn't talk about the future that night. They simply walked, hand in hand, past the Bosphorus Bridge, where the lights shimmered on the water, past the garden where they first shared poetry, past the bookstore where he once bought her a worn copy of Faiz Ahmed Faiz. They made every remaining moment count. When the day of her departure arrived, Istanbul felt colder. Ayan insisted on seeing her off. He helped carry her bags down the hostel stairs, each step heavier than the last. Outside, the cab was waiting, engine humming like the inevitable goodbye. They couldn't delay. I don't want this to be the end, she said, voice cracking. Just a little. It doesn't have to be, he replied. We won't define it. No labels, no pressure, just loyalty, she finished for him. Just us. He smiled. Exactly. There were no grand confessions, no promises carved in stone, just a quiet understanding, a thread that tied to hearts together despite the ocean that would soon stretch between them. She leaned in, her forehead resting against his. Let's not count the miles, she whispered. Let's count the memories. And then, a final hug. The kind that holds more love than words ever could. The kind that says, if this is goodbye, let it be full of hope, not heartbreak. As the cab pulled away, Ayan stood there long after it disappeared from sight. He reached into his pocket, pulling out a small folded paper, her last note, tucked between the pages of the 40 Rules of Love. It read, don't forget me in the ordinary moments, the tea, the music, the quiet hours. I'll be remembering you too. He smiled through the ache. She was gone, but something stayed. The first few weeks apart were filled with hope. Every night, Ayan waited for Zara's call like it was the only thing anchoring his day. Paris was 6 hours behind Lahore, which meant stolen moments between their sunrises and goodnights. It wasn't ideal, but they were willing. Love, after all, isn't always convenient. A tea first. It felt magical. Ayan would sit on the rooftop with his phone pressed to his ear, listening to Zara describe the Parisian streets, the smell of fresh bread, the blur of French conversations she barely understood. She'd laugh about how she got lost looking for her campus and ended up at a tiny second-hand bookstore. He'd tell her about his day managing orders at the family shop, about his mother asking if he was eating enough, about his friends who noticed he smiled differently now, quieter, softer. But slowly, reality crept in. Zara's classes grew demanding. Deadlines mounted. The pressure to succeed after coming so far often left her drained. Ayan, too, found himself buried in responsibilities. His father had fallen ill, and the shop demanded more of his time than ever before. Midnight calls turned into whispers. Voice notes replaced conversations. Messages sometimes went unanswered for hours, then days. Not out of neglect, but because life didn't pause for love. And yet, through all the missed moments, they tried. Ayan sent her old ghazals he recorded in his voice. Zara mailed him a postcard once a month, handwritten, carefully chosen, each one with a pressed flower tucked inside. They clung to the little things, their rituals, their memories, their unspoken belief that this distance was temporary. Still, there were cracks. Sometimes, a call would end too quickly, or begin with excitement and fade into awkward silence. Not because they had run out of things to say, but because the weight of missing each other made the words harder to find. I feel like I'm always apologizing for not having time, Zara whispered one night, her voice shaky on the screen. And I feel like I'm losing you bit by bit, Ayan replied, quieter than he intended. Neither meant to hurt the other. But pain doesn't always come from harsh words. Sometimes it comes from the slow fade of once vivid colors. There were moments Zara would walk along the Seine and imagine him beside her, pointing out constellations like he did in Istanbul. And Ayan would pass by a tea stall in Lahore and imagine her ordering chai with extra sugar, just the way she liked. But imagination only carried them so far. One night, after a particularly long silence, Zara sent him a message. Do you think love can survive without presence? Just on memory alone? It took Ayan an hour to respond. I don't know, he typed, but I know I'm not ready to find out. That night, neither slept. They stayed on call, no words spoken, just the hum of the city in the background, the comfort of each other's breath, and the ache of distance nestled between them. They knew the odds. That not every long-distance story ends in reunion. That even the strongest bonds fray under the weight of silence. But they also knew this. They weren't ready to let go. Not yet. Not when their story had started with such magic. They promised, once again, to try. Not because it was easy, but because some hearts were worth the fight. It started with a photo. Zara posted a story from a cafe in Paris, laughing, surrounded by classmates Ayan didn't recognize. One of them, a guy, sat a little too close. His arm brushed hers. The way she smiled, the way she leaned in it, ignited a storm in Ayan that he couldn't explain and didn't want to admit. He stared at the screen for a long time, heart pounding in a rhythm he wasn't proud of. He didn't reply to her texts that day. Zara noticed. By the time they finally called, the air between them wasn't warm. It was heavy, cold. Who was that guy in your story? Ayan asked casually, like it didn't matter. Zara paused. Just a classmate. We were working on a presentation. Looked like more than that. There it was. The crack. Zara inhaled slowly. You know I wouldn't do anything to hurt you. I know, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. That night, they fought. Not loudly, not cruelly, but with the kind of restraint that hurts more than yelling. Half-truths, defensiveness, silence. Zara accused him of not trusting her. Ayan accused her of moving on. They both knew neither claim was fair, but insecurities have a way of blinding even the most loyal hearts. For the first time, they went 2 full days without speaking. She cried herself to sleep in her tiny Paris apartment. He threw himself into work, but nothing felt right. Jealousy wasn't new to love, but distance magnified every shadow. Every unknown became a threat. Every new friend became a reason to fear. Still, somehow, love always found its way back. Late one night, Zara sent a voice note, her voice soft, broken. I hate this. This fighting. I hate how far you are when all I want is your arms around me. You know it was always you, right? It still is. Even when you're not here. Ayan listened to it on repeat. His pride dissolved. He called her. No words at first, just the sound of both of them crying on the line. I'm sorry, he whispered. I'm sorry too, she replied. I'm just scared. Me too. And there it was, the truth beneath the arguments. They weren't angry. They were afraid. Afraid of losing what they'd built. Afraid that time and space might win. In the days that followed, they learned to speak gently again. They promised to communicate better. Ayan started asking instead of assuming. Zara reassured him more often, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. They made new rules. Always call when something feels off. No sleeping angry. And most importantly, no story, no photo, no person comes between them. There were still tough days, still moments of doubt, still times when they hurt each other without meaning to. But every time, they came back with a soft, I'm sorry, with a midnight I miss you text, with love stitched back into place by effort, by honesty, by the desire to fight for each other instead of with each other. They weren't perfect, but they were trying, and sometimes that's all love needs to survive the storm. Her birthday came quietly in Paris. No family, no celebrations, just Zara alone in her small studio apartment, the city buzzing outside her window, while her heart felt distant, wrapped somewhere far in Lahore with him. The doorbell rang late afternoon. A package. No sender name on top, just her own, written in familiar handwriting. She tore it open with shaky fingers. Inside, tucked neatly beneath folds of brown paper, was a cream-colored envelope. Her name was scrawled across the front in blue ink, his writing. No emojis, no typing bubbles, just something real. Ayan had sent her a letter. The first line read, I didn't know what to get you for your birthday. Everything felt small, except this. So here's a part of my heart written the old way, in words that don't disappear when the screen goes dark. Zara sat down on the floor and read it twice, 3 times. Each word held weight, like he had poured himself into every line. He told her how he'd spent the morning thinking of her favorite song, how he passed by a bookstore and thought of their first conversation about poetry, how even though she was miles away, her presence hadn't left him for a second. I miss your voice, he wrote, but I miss your silence more, the way you used to look at me when words weren't needed. She cried, the kind of cry that feels soft, healing. For the first time in weeks, the ache of distance felt bearable, because even though he wasn't there, he had found a way to reach her, not through a screen, not in a call, but in ink that her fingers could hold. That night, she lit a candle, pulled out a pen, and began to write back. Zara wasn't a letter writer. Not before this. But with him, the words flowed easily. She told him how the Eiffel Tower felt lonelier without him next to her, how she imagined him in the corners of every bookstore she entered, how she still ordered 2 cups of chai out of habit. She enclosed a tiny pressed flower from the garden outside her window. To the bottom, she wrote, I'll wait for your next letter, even if it takes forever. The exchange began. Once a month, without fail, a letter arrived, somewhere, pages long, filled with musings, memories, and small dreams for the future. Others were short, just a poem, or a sketch he drew of her from memory. She sent him postcards from hidden alleys in Paris, photos printed on matte paper, poems scribbled on napkins, petals tucked between pages like love notes from nature. Every letter was a ceremony, every word a promise. Through the loneliness, the busyness, the missed calls and unread texts, These letters became their lifeline. They were slower than texts, but carried more weight. They weren't perfect. Sometimes the ink smudged. Sometimes the words came out messy, but they were real, tangible, honest. And in those envelopes, between folded paper and fragile petals, they built something strong, a love that didn't rush. A connection that didn't depend on Wi-Fi. A story told across oceans, one letter at a time. They kept each envelope like treasure, tied in ribbons, stacked in drawers, marked with dates they never forgot. Because sometimes, when hearts are far apart, it's not the words said instantly that matter but the ones written slowly, with love, and sent across oceans. The letter that month sat unopened on Zara's desk, not because she didn't want to read it but because she was afraid of what it might say. Outside, Paris was blooming into spring, but inside her heart, everything felt frozen. She had just received the offer of a lifetime, a creative director position at a major publishing house in Vienna. It was what she had worked for, dreamed of. But the excitement was swallowed by a quiet ache. She couldn't explain. Back in Lahore, Ayan was fighting his own storm. His mother had sat him down with a smile too wide to be casual. She's a good girl, Beta, educated, from a good family. And most importantly, she's here. No long-distance complications. Her words had been soft, but their weight was heavy. He hadn't said yes. He hadn't said no, but the expectation lingered in the air like smoke. That night, the phone rang between them like it always had. But for the first time, neither of them knew what to say. Zara spoke first, her voice quieter than usual. I got the job in Vienna. He paused. That's amazing. You deserve it. Yeah, she said. But there was no joy in her voice. Just silence. On the other end, Ayan stared at his ceiling, fingers clenched into a fist. My mom wants me to meet someone, he said finally. She inhaled sharply. And I didn't say anything. Another silence dot in that moment. It felt like everything they had built, every letter, every call, every promise was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for one of them to let go. Zara broke the silence, her voice trembling. Maybe this is life telling us we've reached the end. Ayan's heart dropped. Is that what you want? I don't know what I want, she whispered. I just know this hurts. I think about you every day, he said, finally letting the truth pour out. I walk into coffee shops and imagine you across the table. I open books and wonder if you've read the same lines. I'm scared I'll wake up one day and you won't be in my world anymore. Her tears came silently. I'm scared too. A long pause. Then Zara said, almost in a breath, but if I lose you now, I'll always regret it. Those words hung in the air, vulnerable, raw, real. Ayan closed his eyes. He imagined her in her apartment, probably wearing that oversized sweater he liked, probably holding back tears like he was. Then don't lose me, he said. Let's not lose this. Zara nodded even though he couldn't see her. Okay, and just like that, neither of them stepped off the edge. It didn't solve everything. The miles didn't magically shrink. The decisions didn't get easier, but something shifted. The fear of the unknown was still there, but it was no longer stronger than the love they carried. That night, Zara finally opened the letter. It wasn't long, just a simple line he had written at the bottom. When it gets hard, remember we didn't come this far just to let go. She smiled through her tears and picked up her pen. Because love, the real kind, doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's just the quiet decision to stay when leaving seems easier. And that night, they both stayed. It had been nearly 3 years. 3 years of scattered calls, mismatched time zones, love letters soaked with longing, and endless someday promises. But today, that someday had finally come. Zara stepped out of the rickshaw, umbrella in one hand, suitcase in the other. The rain in Lahore was soft, steady, familiar. The same kind that used to drum on the windows during late-night calls with Ayan. The same rain that once drowned their silences and softened their goodbyes. She stood outside his old bookstore, heart thudding like a drum. It looked just the same: worn brick walls, faded green signage, and a tiny bell that jingled whenever someone walked in. The shop hadn't changed, but she had. And maybe he had too. Zara pushed the door open. The familiar scent of old paper and chai leaves welcomed her like an old friend. The bell rang softly. Ayan was at the counter, his back turned, arranging a stack of books. He didn't look up. Hello, she whispered, unsure whether her voice would betray the storm inside her. Ayan turned it first. He just blinked, as if trying to match reality with a memory. Then, his eyes widened. Slowly, he set the book down, his fingers trembling slightly. Zara, he said, barely a breath, like her name was something sacred. She nodded. A single tear slipped down her cheek. He walked around the counter without a word, crossed the distance between them in a few slow steps, and then he hugged her. It wasn't a careful, polite embrace. It was a trembling, breaking, aching kind of hug. The kind where silence speaks louder than confessions. Her umbrella clattered to the floor, forgotten, as she clung to him like a lifeline. His arms wrapped around her tightly, like he feared she might disappear again. She whispered against his chest, "I couldn't stay away anymore." "You shouldn't have," he replied, voice cracked. "You were always meant to come back." For a few minutes, they stood like that, time suspended, the rain outside tapping like applause against the glass. Then he pulled back slightly, cupping her face like she was still a dream. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, smiling through unshed tears. "Because I wanted to see your face when I walked in," she said, laughing softly. "And I needed to know if you still felt like home." He looked around the bookstore, then at her. "Home isn't a place anymore," he said. "It's this, right here." Zara took a deep breath. "I left everything. The job, the apartment, everything. I want a life here, with you." Ayan didn't hesitate. "Then we start now." He led her to the tiny reading corner, where once they used to sit and talk for hours. He made her chai just how she liked it. No sugar, extra cardamom. They sat close, legs touching, hands finding each other naturally. Outside, the rain continued to fall. Inside, time stitched itself back together. Later that evening, he reached beneath the counter and pulled out a stack of old letters. Hers. "I read them all again last night," he said. "Even the one where you said, 'If we survive this distance, I'll marry you under the rain.'" She blushed. "Did I really write that?" He nodded, grinning. "So, it's raining." Zara smiled, eyes sparkling. "Then what are you waiting for?